This is my full living dex in Pokemon Home. Every Pokemon, form change, gender difference, and regional variant, with maybe one or two missing. Back when I started this, it was in my Fire Red copy. I would always try to get every Pokemon and then send them up to the latest games while catching all the Pokemon every new game had to offer. I would also try to go back as far as possible to obtain later evolutions and regional variants. For example, Alola and Raichu, I would catch as a Pikachu in Fire Red and then send it up to Sun and Moon and evolve it there. I have worked on this living dex for years, but what if I could take it a step further? My name is Dominator, and in this series, I will be revamping my full living dex in Pokemon Home by catching every Pokemon in their original games, and I'll be doing this using Pokeballs only. This episode is Generation 1. Before we begin, let me explain a few things. First off, why am I doing this? Well, when I started my full living dex, I genuinely tried to catch every Pokemon as far back as they could go, but this was before the Generation 1 and 2 games were available on the 3DS, and as you may or may not know, the Generation 1 and 2 games on the Game Boy and Game Boy Color couldn't connect to the Generation 3 games and onward. So the farthest back you could go was Generation 3. I wanted to redo this living dex, but by doing it the way I originally intended. Why Pokeballs only? Part of it is because it would be more of a challenge, but the main reason is because after the whole quick ball debate on social media recently, I realized that like 90% of my living dex was caught in either quick balls, repeat balls, or dusk balls, as those are some of the highest catch rate Pokeballs you can use. And I have nothing against quick balls, they're actually one of my favorite looking Pokeballs. But I wanted to keep things in my living dex as consistent as possible, and to do that, I would need to use the original Pokeball for everything. The rules of this challenge are simple. I need to get every Pokemon, gender difference, form change, evolution, and regional variant from the original generation of games they were first available in, and I need to use Pokeballs only. I would prefer if I'm the original trainer for everything, but as you'll see later in this video, that's impossible to do with a couple of Pokemon. Other than that, that's pretty much it. If you've made it this far in the video, please consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. I hope to make a video like this for every generation, and doing those two things lets me know you guys enjoyed this video. Alright, let's get into this. First, we needed to get the starter Pokemon. So I started a new copy on my red version and began choosing Bulbasaur as my first starter, battling Blue, and then making my way to Viridian City in order to get the parcel to deliver to Professor Oak. Then I get the Pokedex, then go back to Viridian City, get Pokeballs, and then catch my first Pokemon, being either a Pidgey or a Rattata. I needed to do this so I could send my starter Pokemon into Pokemon Bank in order to start over the game again and get more starters, as you could only get one starter per save file, and there's no breeding in Generation 1. Also, this video is going to serve as a quick PSA to make sure you download any Generation 1 or 2 Virtual Console games, Pokemon Bank, and Poke Transporter on your 3DS before the 3DS eShop closes on March 27th of this month. Actually, it's actually March already, so you only have a few weeks to do this. In order to add funds, you can do it by connecting your 3DS funds to your Switch funds and buying games on there. The Pokemon Bank application is free and you need it downloaded. Unfortunately, you do have to purchase a membership for Pokemon Bank in order to use it at all, and you have to use Pokemon Bank in order to download Poke Transporter, as you cannot normally find it on the 3DS eShop. It's kind of annoying like that, but you won't regret it, because this is the only way to connect the Generation 1 through 7 games all the way up into the modern Switch games. So you definitely want to have these applications before they are unavailable forever. Another software that is a must download before the eShop closes is the Sun and Moon demo. It's a bit of a weird one, but still to this day, it is the only place that you can get Ash Greninja from. So if you want to get an Ash Greninja before it becomes unavailable forever, download the Sun and Moon demo and play through it. So I got my Bulbasaur and I sent it up into Pokemon Bank, no issues. We rinse and repeat until we get the rest of the Bulbasaur line. However, Venusaur is one of the few starters that actually has a gender difference, and unfortunately, the gender ratio is 1 in 8 for a female. So you're much more likely to get a male one than a female one. And there's no way to determine what gender it is when you pick it up until you send it into Pokemon Bank, and yeah, we would have had to do this on average of about 8 times in order to get a female one and check them every time. I didn't want to do that though. However, there is a really neat trick in order to determine the gender of your starter Pokemon, and this also works for any of the 1 in 8 gender ratio Pokemon in Generation 1, is the gender is actually based off of the IVs, or DVs as they're called in the Generation 1 and 2 games. But essentially, if your attack stat on your starter is either 0 or 1 in its IVs, I'm just going to refer to them as IVs because it's a little easier. If it's either 0 or 1 in the IVs of the attack, it will be a female. Now, it's kind of hard to determine if it's going to be 1 in attack, because having even a 2 or maybe even a 3 could still result in the same stat that your Bulbasaur currently has. But if it is a 0 in attack, it is very obvious because it is a completely different value. So what I did is I saved in front of Bulbasaur for the 4th time and just picked it up and checked its attack stat. If the attack stat was 9, I would keep it, and that would be guaranteed to be female. If it was anything other than 9, I knew there was a chance it wasn't a female, or most likely it was just a male guaranteed. And we reset only a few times and got the 9 attack stat, meaning it was a female, and that was pretty awesome. Also, while I'm here, if you're wondering why I have a face cam, but I'm not like saying anything, there's no audio in these clips, it's because I streamed most of this challenge on my Twitch. You can follow me, linked in the description of all my videos. After getting all our Bulbasaurs, including the female one, next was Charmander, and then we did it with Squirtle, and we just rinsed and repeated until we got all of the starters. I then kind of jumped the gun, but honestly, it doesn't really matter what order I do these in. But we sent all of our starter Pokemon into Pokemon Home, sent them into Sword and Shield, and then that allowed us to evolve them a lot easier, because if you use a Pokeball Plus for Pokemon Go and have a Pokemon in it, you can get a ton of rare candies in Sword and Shield, and I'm like always balancing having 999 rare candies. So it's really easy to just level all these guys up and evolve them. I also took this a step further and gave all of these starter Pokemon, well, all of the fully evolved starter Pokemon, Max Soup, and that allowed them to Gigantamax, or at least have the Gigantamax factor. I'm not sure if I'll actually ever use them, but it's cool to have them at least. I also need to explain that in this video, I'm kind of all over the place and didn't really do anything in a set order, because I had a balance between playing through Pokemon Red, Pokemon Yellow, and a bunch of other games, and also evolving Pokemon and catching all the Pokemon. So it got to the point where things are kind of everywhere, but I am showing them in the rough order that I actually did everything in. But obviously, to start, after we got all the starters, we just go back to Viridian City, get some Pokeballs, because that's the only thing that matters in this challenge. And we gotta go and catch our first Pokemon on Route 1, which is, you know, Rattata and Pidgey. I will have to point out that I did have to catch a few Rattatas in order to get the gender differences, because Rattata and Raticate both have gender differences. It is the whiskers, they are different sizes, but I can't determine which is which, so we just have to catch them and hope it works. So I caught a couple. I didn't catch everything right then and there. I also went to the left of Viridian City, caught 3 Nidoran males and 2 Spearows to complete those 2 lines. Nidoran female is sort of an exclusive to blue version, but we can at least get it in the Safari Zone, which we will do later. And then we made our way through Viridian Forest and caught a few Pokemon that we needed in this. Mainly the full Weedle line, so we caught 3 of those. I ended up finding a couple 5% Pikachus, which I didn't really expect, and I also learned that Caterpie is 5% in this game when it's flipped between Caterpie and Weedle in the other game. I didn't realize Caterpie was so rare, so at this time I only caught 2 so I could deal with the gender differences later, but here is me catching 2 Caterpies and 2 Pikachus and then the full Weedle line. I then realized that I needed to get a Pidgey because I never done that, so we caught ourselves a Pidgey and another Rattata. And then we fast forward, played through more of the game, and made our way to Diglett's Cave next to Vermilion City to get ourselves both Diglett and Dugtrio. Quick tip, if you're playing through either red, blue, yellow, or fire red and leaf green, there is a very easy repel trick you can do to guarantee almost a level 30 or even a level 30 or 31 Dugtrio that can just absolutely destroy Lieutenant Surge, and all you need is about a level 25 Pokemon and then just use repels until you get it. It's kind of slow, but all you need is the one encounter, which is what I did to get Dugtrio for not only my team, but for my living decks. After beating Lieutenant Surge, I decided to just go north of Vermilion and get myself a few Oddish. We actually need about 6 of these, assuming the genders are correct, in order to get the full gender set for Gloom, Vileplume, and then also a Blossom for Generation 2 when we get to that. I will not be evolving anything that is in Generation 2 or later in this video, but I will be catching the Pokemon that I need for those evolutions. And speaking of new evolutions, I did have to catch 3 Mankeys in this area as well in order to get Mankey, Primeape, and then eventually Annihilate. Then we made our way to Mount Moon, and I caught myself a few Geodudes. We only need 3 of this one because there's no gender difference. We got a few Zubats. We actually need about 5 Zubats. I think I miscounted and actually got 6 in this one, but we did need 5 of them because Zubat and Golbat have a gender difference, and Crobat does not, but still exists as a Pokemon. And then we also had to get 3 Machops and 3 Onix. The reason why we need 3 Onix is because Onix is a Pokemon we need, and then it evolves in Generation 2 into Steelix, and Steelix has a gender difference. So, unfortunately, we have to just hope we get one of them to be a different gender, but it's a 50-50 shot and we're catching 3 of them. I like those odds. After that, we made our way to Celadon City and managed to buy a Thunderstone for one of our Pikachus that we used on our team for Raichu, as Raichu is pretty useful in Generation 1, at least for my playthroughs. Then we made our way to the back of the apartment building and made our way to the top to get ourselves one of many Eevee. Now, Eevee is a very special situation in this. As I stated before with the starters, you only get 1 per save file, but there's no breeding in Generation 1. So in order to get Eevee, which, by the way, if you are including Eevee's gender difference that was introduced in Let's Go, and all of its evolutions that it gets in later generations, there are 10 you need to get, meaning I have to play through Celadon 10 times to get all of these Eevees. Yay. But here's our first Eevee, and we decided to just evolve it into a Vaporeon because we needed a water type for our team, and it's the first one in the Dex anyway, so it kind of worked out. Because after you get cut, you pretty much have access to most of Kanto outside of the places you need to surf to. We made our way to Saffron City, and we battled the Karate Master. I think he's just a black belt in this game, but it's the Karate Master with his Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan. He lets us pick one of the Pokemon. I'm not worried about this one because we will have to play through these games multiple times anyway, so we'll just pick one this time and then one next time. In this time, I decided to pick Hitmonlee. I then made my way to Lavender Town into the Pokemon Tower to catch myself 3 Ghastlies, and I do need 3 Cubones in this in order to get the full line plus a Alolan Marowak, but unfortunately, I was getting kind of unlucky and impatient, so we decided to catch only 1 Cubone and then leave the rest for later. I then made my way to one of the Snorlax that was blocking the path, played the White Flute, and got myself a Snorlax. At this point, I unlocked the ability to surf, and if you know Pokemon Red and Blue, you know that surf is probably the most important thing in this game, as it gives us access to Cinnabar Island, which, if anyone knows about the famous missing no glitch, the old man glitch, it's very useful to have surf in this game, and it's going to help us a lot through this series. But as we were making our way to Cinnabar Island, we found ourselves a Tentacool, and I caught that for the living dex. We did not get a second one because we are going to do that later, I guess. I made my way to the science lab, I think is what it's called, and I didn't show this earlier, but I picked up the Helix fossil and the old Amber, and I revived both of them to get Ammonite and Aerodactyl. I then decided to do this extremely grindy process and buy a bunch of coins at the game corner in order to buy every Pokemon I need that was exclusive to the game corner. This includes 3 Dratini, 3 Porygon, a Pinsir, and 5 Scythers. The reason why we need 5 Scythers is because Scyther and Scizor both have gender differences, and Cleavor is a thing in Legends Arceus that we can send an old Scyther to and evolve it in there. So we bought our 3 Dratinis, and then I jump ahead and decided to evolve my Rattata so I could have a Super Fang Raticate that would help me catch Pokemon way easier using Pokeballs. And then I decided that it was taking way too long to buy these coins, as you could only buy 50 coins at a time in these game corners. In Fire Red Leaf Green, they made it so you can buy 500 at a time, and that's way better. But this took, I want to say, at least an hour and a half to complete, but I even ran 2 games to buy coins, and we bought all of the Scythers, all of the Dratinis, all the Porygons, and the 1 Pinsir that we needed. I also totally forgot that the window to the left can sell you Abra, Clefairy, and I think 1 other Pokemon, but I didn't think of that at the time, and we will get back to that later anyway. I then made my way into the power plant, as there were many Pokemon I needed to catch here. We needed to get 2 Voltorbs, 3 Magnemites, and at least 3 more Pikachus, as Pikachu and Raichu has the gender difference, and we also need the Alolan Raichu. After catching all of those Pokemon, we actually conveniently found a Magneton, so we didn't even have to evolve this one, which was great. And we stumbled upon a little bird known as Zapdos, which you might be thinking, it's gonna be very hard to catch a legendary using only Pokeballs, and I was thinking the same thing, and funny enough, it only took me a few Pokeballs to catch Zapdos. Now, one thing to know about Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow is that it is a lot easier to catch Pokemon than you would think. Pretty much all you have to do is set them to either half HP or quarter HP, which is perfect with Super Fang. You can either use it once or twice. And if you put the Pokemon to sleep, it is a very high catch rate, even with Pokeballs, even if it's a legendary. So it will only take us a max of like 8 Pokeballs to catch any of the legendaries. I'm just gonna spoil it right there. But we did need to get one other Pokemon, and technically 2. We needed to get Electabuzz. So I did a loose repel trick to make Electabuzz a little more common, and we caught 2 of them, one for Electabuzz and one for Electivire eventually. And then I decided to start working along all the Pokemon I needed to complete. So we went to one of the earlier routes to get Jigglypuff, the route to the right of Pewter City. I'm not going to know the names of every route. I know they're just numbers, but I don't know all of them by heart, so bear with me there. And after catching these 2 Jigglypuffs, I decided to quickly just evolve one of them with the Moonstone that we had. So there's our Wigglytuff. I then made my way into Mount Moon, caught myself a couple Paris, caught myself a couple Clefairies, and then I proceeded to go on an evolution spree using a bunch of duplicated rare candies that I got in this game. So we got Primeape, we got Pidgeotto, we got our full Beedrill line, we got Fearow, Nidorino, and Nidoking. We also duplicated Moonstones, if you're wondering. We got our Electrode, our Dragonair, and our Dragonite. We got ourselves a Haunter, Clefable, and a Parasect. I then decided to catch more Pokemon, so I went to the right of Vermilion City and got myself a couple Ekans, and I also needed 3 Drowsies because Hypno has a gender difference, so we caught ourselves our 3 Drowsies and evolved the Ekans into an Arbok. And the next place I decided to go was the Safari Zone. Now, I'm going to take this time to explain that any Pokemon that has a gender difference, whether it's in the evolution or not, I will not be evolving in Red and Blue. I will be first sending them up into Pokemon Bank, so I know I have the correct gender. So if you're wondering why we didn't evolve the Hypno or most of the Rattatas or most of the Pikachus, that is why. We will be doing that later in the video. But we made our way into the Safari Zone as there are a lot of Pokemon we need to get, mainly 4 Doduos for that gender difference. We need 6 Rhyhorns for that gender difference. We also need the Tauros, the Kangaskhan, 2 Chanseys, a couple Venonats, and 3 Executes. So the first one I got was Execute, which was actually a lot easier to catch. Venonat was a bit more troublesome, but we ended up catching 2 of those with not too many issues. And we conveniently found ourselves a few Nidoran females to complete that line, which normally is pretty rare because we are in red version, but it's pretty common in blue version. Also, if you are wondering, there's a huge elephant in the room right now. I cannot use Pokeballs in the Safari Zone. I have to use Safari Balls, which are technically the catch rate of Great Balls, so this is kind of cheating on my part. But the reason why I'm letting this slide is because there's no way to catch most of these Pokemon with Pokeballs in this game. And regardless, Pokeball data isn't recorded in Generation 1 or 2 after you catch the Pokemon. The Pokeball data is really only used to increase your catch rate for specific Pokemon. After that, the game does not care what Pokeball it was caught in and doesn't save that data because it just says that it was caught. So sending up Pokemon from Generation 1 and Generation 2 into later games, no matter what you catch them in, they will always be shown to be caught in Pokeballs. Now, technically speaking, I could cheese the system, duplicate a bunch of Master Balls, and then use all of those. But I didn't really want to do this because it seems kind of cheesy and I feel like it's a lot more fun to try to do this with Pokeballs anyway. But after catching a great number of Pokemon from the Safari Zone, we started doing some evolutions. I evolved my Execute into Executor. I evolved my Nidorans into Nidorina and Nidoqueen. I evolved my Venonat into Venomoth. And then I decided to go back to Viridian Forest and catch a couple more Caterpies because I didn't want to be impatient anymore and just get those over with. I then made my way back to the Safari Zone and decided to catch the last few Doduos I need and the Rhyhorns. We need about 6 of these, assuming the genders are correct. But it is a 50-50 gender ratio, so I'm pretty sure this is going to be pretty easy to get all these, right? After catching all those Rhyhorns, I went to Fuchsia City and started using the Super Rod in order to get a couple Krabbies, 4 Goldings for the gender differences for both Goldeen and Seeking, and 4 Magikarp for those gender differences as well. And honestly, oh my gosh, fishing in this game is a complete nightmare. It takes so long to get bites most of the time, but we pulled through and we managed to catch all of the Pokemon that we needed, assuming their genders are correct. Now, it is pretty difficult to get the correct genders when it is only one of each and you're not catching a bunch of them, but you know, I'm gonna be hopeful for these. I then decided to catch an additional Pidgey because I wanted another Pidgeot so I could send it to home while still using mine for Fly, and we evolved it into Pidgeotto and then Pidgeot. I then decided to evolve a couple more Pokemon, mainly the trade evolution Pokemon, so we got Machoke and Graveler, and I decided to trade off those along with the Haunter I got earlier into my other game to evolve them. I also want to give a quick moment to showcase that I realized that on my blue file that I had already started, I had an Ammonite already, and because I didn't want to play through Cinnabar Island more times than I had to, so I then decided to just take this Ammonite and trade it into my red copy so I could have 2 Ammonites for the full line. I then decided to go back, and this is when I realized that you could buy Abra and Clefairy in the game corner, and just buy like 17 Abras. Abra itself doesn't have a gender difference, but Kadabra and Alakazam both do, so we do need 5 of them. Unfortunately, Abra's female ratio is 1 in 4, so technically speaking, we would need like 8 or so in order to get 2 females, but I do not like those odds, so we just bought a bunch of them. I then decided to evolve my Ammonite into Amistar, and this is when we first started sending some Pokemon into Bank. I realized that you could only send in Pokemon from box 1, and I was catching about 6 boxes worth of Pokemon, so we had to tediously take every Pokemon out of each box 5 at a time and then deposit them 5 at a time into box 1 until that box was full and then send them up. I also realized that the Rattatas I sent up were all male, so unfortunately I had to delete one and just catch a couple more and hope I get some female ones. So we decided to catch one more Rattata, as I do plan to send in Eradicate as well, so hopefully that one's female at least, and it ended up being a female one luckily. Unfortunately, the 3 Onix that I had caught were all female, despite only needing one of them to have a different gender, so I had to catch another Onix. Luckily, all the genders for our Drowsy was correct, and all of the genders for our Pikachus were correct, so that was very lucky on our part. Then we sent up a lot of the Safari Pokemon, and oh my gosh, all of my Rhyhorns except for one of them are female. So I gotta catch a bunch of these things still. Luckily, our Doduos were all the correct gender, which was huge because Doduo was way harder to catch than Rhyhorn was. I then realized I never evolved my Krabby, so I'm gonna evolve Krabby into Kingler, and we send in another wave of Pokemon. Luckily, all of the Goldines and Seeking and Magikarps were all the correct gender I needed, so that was a huge relief, as fishing in this game was just awful. I didn't want to do that for more of the Magikarps and Goldines. That would have been terrible. Out of the like 16 Abras I sent in, we ended up getting 3 females, which is pretty cool, but I only needed 2 of them, so we had to delete all except for 2 of them. And then we had to go back and re-catch a couple Onix. I only need 1, but I decided to catch 2 just to play it safe. And same goes for Rhyhorn. I technically only need 2 Rhyhorn, but I decided to catch 4 more just to play it safe. I'm playing it safe here, guys. It's gotta work. It's gotta work. Are you kidding me? I still need to get 1 more of these Rhyhorns. Oh my gosh. Hey, but at least one of the Onix was male, so that's great. We'll have both genders for Steelix once we get to Generation 2, so that's fantastic. So I'm back to the Safari Zone, catching more Rhyhorns, and at this point, I think I was catching them until I ran out of Safari Balls, and as tedious as that sound, we were trying to catch Chanseys as well, so those ate up a lot of our Safari Balls anyway. So now is the moment of truth. Do we get another male Rhyhorn? And we did, which is so good. Now we can get the full gender set of Rhyhorn, Rhydon, and Rhyperior eventually, so that is fantastic. I then realized that I never picked up Eevee in my blue version, so we picked up a second Eevee and decided to evolve it into Jolteon. I then made my way to Viridian City and fished for some Poliwags and an extra Tentacool. Now, Poliwag, we need 5 of them. We need 3 for the Poliwag line in Kanto, and then Politoad has a gender difference, so we need 2 of those. 50-50 gender ratio, we're catching 5 of them. Only 1 of them needs to be a different gender, so this one would be pretty easy. And then we decided to evolve Tentacool into Tentacruel. And to no one's surprise, we ended up getting a varying gender for Poliwag. However, I believe only 1 of them was a different gender, so it was still pretty close despite how likely we were to pull that off anyway. Then I decided to go to Misty's gym and just start fishing, because who doesn't just fish in someone's gym, you know? We did this for Psyduck, and we needed 2 Psyducks for the full line, and then I promptly evolved one of the Psyducks into Golduck. I then made my way to the Pokemon Mansion, where there's a lot of Pokemon here that we need. We need 3 Coughings, 2 Grimers, 2 Growliths, 2 Ponytas, and then more in blue version, but we'll get to that later. Growlithe was a bit difficult as Growlithe had the move Roar, and there was pretty much nothing you could do about it, so you just had to hope that it didn't use Roar turn 1 and you could either catch it, or in my case, I put it to sleep and then chuck balls at it. Sleep Powder is kind of broken in Generation 1, so it worked out, but it was still pretty difficult to get these Growliths. We then used a Firestone to evolve one of the Growliths into Arcanine. We leveled up our Grimer into a Muck and our Ponyta into a Rapidash. And since we caught Weezing already, we didn't need to evolve that one, but we did need an extra Coughing for Galarian Weezing later on, which is why we caught 3. I then made my way to the Seafoam Islands where there's a plethora of Pokemon we need to catch, including 2 Shelder, 3 Slowpoke, 3 Horsey, 2 Seal, 2 Staryu, and everyone's favorite, or at least my favorite legendary bird, Articuno. And after catching all these Pokemon, we evolved Slowpoke into Slowbro, Staryu into Starmie, Shelder into Cloyster, Horsey into Seadra, and Seal into Dugong. I still needed to catch an additional Shelder and Horsey, but my box was full, so I couldn't complete those tasks, so we'll get those later. But we needed to send in that box of Pokemon into Pokemon Bank. I then caught the last Shelder I needed and the last Horsey I needed, and then made my way over to Articuno. And just like how easy Zapdos was to catch, Articuno, I'm pretty sure I only caught in like 1 or 2 balls. We then decided to finish off the trio and go for Moltres, and I was thinking maybe Moltres is going to take a bit longer, and it honestly did. It took maybe 5 balls to catch. They're all really easy. I then decided to go back to Lavender Town and catch 2 more Cubones to complete those lines, and then I made my way south of Pallet Town to get 3 Tangulas. Tangela doesn't have a gender difference, but Tangrowth does, so we do need 3 of those. So as I stated earlier in the video, I want to try to get every Pokemon to have my original trainer, but there's 2 Pokemon that are impossible to do that with. These Pokemon are Mr. Mime and Jinx. The reason for this is because you have to trade a couple NPCs to get these Pokemon, and there's no other way to encounter them wild. Now, technically speaking, Jinx is encounterable in the wild in the Japanese version of Pokemon Blue, but I didn't think getting 1 Jinx with my original trainer ID from Generation 1 was justifiable to spend $10 on a Japanese copy of a game I already had. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to trade for it. Another thing I should mention is that normally Farfetch'd and Lickitung need to be traded as well, but you can actually encounter both of those wild in Pokemon Yellow. So we will be catching those later. Next up, I went to catch a Ditto, and it was pretty hard to catch once it turned into Eradicate, but we got it with not too many issues. And then we sent in a new wave of Pokemon into Pokemon Bank. At this point, I had to start getting some of the version exclusives on Pokemon Blue, so we had to get a couple Sandshrews on the route to the right of Vermilion City, and on the route directly above Vermilion City, we had to get a couple Bellsprouts and a couple Meowths. I then went back to the dojo in Saffron City and got a Hitmonchan this time from the Black Belt, and then I went to the right of Fuchsia City in order to get a Weepinbell, so I didn't have to evolve an extra Bellsprout. Then I went back to the Pokemon Mansion on Cinnabar Island and needed to get 2 Vulpix and 2 Magmar. Now, Magmar is only at 10%, so it's not like super rare, but it's not super common, but for some reason, it took me way too long to find a couple Magmar. I did need 2 Magmar, 1 for Magmortar, and for some reason, they took a while to find, but, you know, we pulled through, and then we evolved these new Pokemon that we got. We got Vulpix into Ninetales, Sandshrew into Sandslash, Weepinbell into Victory Bell, and Meowth into Persian. I then made my way through Cerulean Cave and battled this really angry cat for some reason. And even though Mewtwo is intended to be the final boss of the whole game, it was still really easy to catch with a regular Pokeball like all the other legendaries. We then sent a new wave of Pokemon into Pokemon Bank, and at this point we needed to only get a few more Pokemon from Generation 1, but we had to play through Yellow version in order to get those extra Pokemon, so we're gonna get those later. And at this point, we're going on to my Moon version to get some more evolutions in, and to catch some more Alolan Pokemon. So we found this Alolan Raticate while level grinding, so I figured I'd try to catch this, and it was pretty tough, but we got it with a Pokeball. Then my 2 Metapods evolved into both forms of Butterfree. As you can see, the female one has spots on the bottom wings, and we evolved our Rattata into Raticate, so we have both genders for Raticate, which is great. I then decided to finish off the Rattata line and go to Verdant Cavern, where I accidentally encountered an Alolan Diglett, where I just decided to catch it because we still needed it. I then walked into an ambush encounter, which has a 100% chance to be Alolan Rattata in Pokemon Moon or Ultra Moon, which I do plan to shiny hunt at some point. I think it'd be really cool. And immediately after, we decided to evolve one of our Pikachu into Alolan Raichu. Now, one fun fact about the Alola games is that in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon only, if you go through the wormholes and get to one of those Ultra Space areas where you either encounter the random Pokemon or the Ultra Beasts or Legendaries, you can actually evolve Pikachu, Cubone, and Execute into their Kanto versions instead of the Alolan versions, because you're not technically in in Alola. However, even though I own both Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, neither of my save files are played through that far, and I didn't want to do that, so we're just gonna wait until we send them into Sword and Shield to evolve my last Pikachu into Raichu. We then made our way to Mount Lanakila and found ourselves a couple Alolan Sandshrews. Much like Kanto Raichu, I do have both Sun and Ultra Sun in order to get Alolan Vulpix. However, neither of them are played through that far, so I didn't want to play super far in order to catch Alolan Vulpix. So instead, I just grabbed my Kanto Vulpix I got from my blue version and my Ditto I got from my red version, which for those who don't know, if you are in an area with a regional variant, you will get the Pokemon's regional variant as the offspring regardless of the parents, unless they are holding an Everstone. Then if they're holding an Everstone, it'll be whatever regional variant the parent is. So we just didn't give our Vulpix an Everstone and bred it with the Ditto and got a couple Alolan Vulpix out of it. We then did some more evolutions, evolving our Zubats into Golbats with the gender differences, our Oddishes into Glooms and then Vileplumes with the gender differences, our Poliwags into Poliwhirl and Poliwrath, and then our Abras into Kadabra and Alakazams with the gender difference. We had to do a couple trades for the Alakazams, which is part of the reason why I didn't send these up into Sword and Shield just yet, as I only have one Switch, so I can't really do trade evolutions on my own. So we had to do these in the 3DS. And we evolved our Doduos into Dodrios with the gender differences, and our Drowsies into Hypnos, and our Execute into Alolan Executor, along with our Magikarps into Gyarados with the gender differences. I then decided I want to finish off the Alolan Diglett line, so I found an Alolan Dugtrio in the desert area and ended up catching it quite easily. I then located Alolan Graveler, which is just outside the town that's run by Team Skull. I forget the name of the town. I think it's like Po Town or something. Don't quote me on that. Alolan Graveler was a lot more difficult because it always went for self-destruct, and I pretty much had to get really lucky and either false swipe it and just catch it before it went for self-destruct, or I would just hope that it had Sturdy and try to one-shot it where it held on with Sturdy and then catch it and hope it didn't go for self-destruct then. But regardless, it took many attempts to catch two Alolan Gravelers. Then, in order to complete the line, we went and got ourselves an Alolan Geodude, which was significantly easier to catch. And then I traded over my Alolan Graveler to evolve it into Alolan Golem. We then went to the Pokemon School and got ourselves two Alolan Meowths and two Alolan Grimers. And after this, I decided to go back to Generation 1 and take on the Safari, where I did a loose repel trick in order to make Kangaskhan, Chansey, and Tauros more common in their respective areas. And honestly, it did not take me long to catch any of these Pokemon. They were a lot easier to catch than I thought, and they showed up a lot more frequently than I thought they would as well. On top of that, you can also save in the Safari Zone, so that made it a lot easier to do. We then sent these Safari Pokemon into Pokemon Bank, and now we're on to the Pokemon Yellow Pokemon. So for this one, I decided to do something cheesy for this Pokemon, where I decided to engage in battle with this one NPC and then promptly run away from him and encounter a Ditto, which turned into my Zapdos. I then KO'd the Zapdos and walked on to Nugget Bridge until my menu opened up and I found this very scary looking Aerodactyl named Missing No. This allowed me to duplicate the Dome fossils I had, so I didn't have to start any more save files. So I got two Kabutos and I leveled one up to level 40 and evolved it right away. I then grabbed the Eevee that I get every save file from my yellow version and evolved this one into Flareon. So now we have all the Generation 1 Eeveelutions. I then went to the area with the docks and found a patch of grass that gave me Farfetch'd, which is normally an NPC trade, but not in yellow. You can find it wild. And then went to the bottom floor of Cerulean Cave in order to find two Lickitungs. We need one for Lickitung and one for Licky Licky. I then sent these Pokemon into Pokemon Bank and went back to my Moon version where I evolved my Rhyhorns into Rhydons with the gender difference, my Cubone into Alolan Marowak, which now that I think about it, I'm not sure where the footage of me evolving Cubone into Kanto Marowak went, but rest assured, I do have that Pokemon. And we evolved our Alolan Grimer into Alolan Muck. And then at this point, we loaded up my Ultra Moon file and went to the Pikachu Valley where this delivery man was, and he gifted me a partner cat Pikachu. Now, a little thing about this Pikachu is that there were other Ash Hat Pikachus that were available in the Alolan games via an event, but I cannot catch these right now, but rest assured, I do have these already, so they are already going to be counted in my living dex. Another quirky thing about this Pikachu is that you actually can shiny hunt it. There's a 1 in 40/96 chance that it will be shiny locked because of the way they tried to shiny lock it, but you can shiny hunt it. I even have a video of me getting it. I'll leave a card on screen now if I remember to do so. Now what we have to do is get the rest of the Eevees to get all the other Eeveelutions from later gens and both male and female Eevee for the gender differences. In order to get all these at a relatively quick pace, I decided to do this really busted glitch called the Brock Through Walls glitch. Essentially, to do this glitch, you just need a level 8 Bulbasaur Bulbasaur and then some other Pokemon, and then you need to cheese this guy by pausing the game when he's in the middle of it trying to take you to Brock's gym, and then reset the game. It glitches out. It does all these shenanigans. I'm not going to go super in depth in it. If you want to know how to do this, there are many tutorials online for doing it, and pretty much it just lets you walk through walls anywhere. So we just walked all the way to Celadon City where we needed to get Eevee, which was the only thing we needed to get. We saved and reset before entering the building, because if we didn't do that, it would glitch our game out and we would be frozen. Then we go and get Eevee again. Then we just restart our save file and rinse and repeat, which just saves you so many hours trying to get all the Eevees from Generation 1. But here's all our Eevees. We take them and we put them back into Pokemon Bank. I also did do that reset method in order to get Eevee to be female, where it had to have 0 attack, and that was pretty straightforward. I then decided to evolve my Alolan Meowth into Alolan Persian, and now we're on to the Galarian forms. A very interesting Galarian form is Galarian Mr. Mime. Now, Galarian Mr. Mime was introduced in, obviously, Sword and Shield and Galar, but in order to get a Galarian Mr. Mime from the oldest type of game, you can actually get them from Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. In order to do this, you just find Mime Jr. in Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, catch it, send it up into Sword and Shield, and then evolve it there, as Galarian Mime comes from a regular Mime Jr. So we caught a couple Mime Juniors, one for Galarian Mr. Mime and for Mr. Rhyme. We played this goofy minigame on Black 2 in order to send them up into Generation 5, then sent them into Pokemon Bank via Poke Transporter, and then we decided to move everything we currently had from Pokemon Bank into Pokemon Home. This was a big move, and it's honestly kind of satisfying seeing me put all these Pokemon in their correct slots. Now that we're in Sword and Shield, we can do some more evolutions. I'm finally evolving one of my Pikachus into Kanto Raichu for the male gender difference. We're evolving our Alolan Sandshrew and our Alolan Vulpix into Sandslash and Ninetales because we didn't have any Ice Stones in my Moon copy. Then we evolved our Generation 1 Coughing into Galarian Wheezing. We evolved our Generation 4 Mime Jr. into a Galarian Mr. Mime. And we put all these in their correct slots in Pokemon Home. Now I needed to actually catch some Galarian forms. To start, we did Galarian Meowth, which I'm not going to catch 2 of these. We'll worry about Berserker when the time comes. And then we went to the Isle of Armor and caught ourselves 2 Galarian Slowpokes. And shortly after, we went to this little island and got ourselves a Galarica Cuff so we could evolve our Slowpoke into Slowbro. We went to the route where the nursery's on and found ourselves a Galarian Farfetch'd, which is the sword exclusive Galarian form. Then on our shield version, we went to Glimwood Tangle and found ourselves 2 Galarian Ponytas, which is exclusive to shield version. And we evolved one of the Galarian Ponytas into Rapidash. Then we went to the Crown Tundra and found these silly Galarian birds that we needed to catch. And when they saw us, they quickly ran away, so we had to track them down. We located Galarian Articuno relatively quickly in the Crown Tundra. However, I didn't want to mess with the stupid minigame it does over and over again, so I just saved in front of it so that I didn't have to keep tracking it down every time I lost. And eventually we got the answer correct and we encountered Galarian Articuno. Now, if I'm being honest, Galarian Articuno was pretty easy to catch. I think it only took us like 5 balls to catch it in. Next was Zapdos though, and Zapdos was running around the wild area, and unfortunately it stopped in the one area I didn't want it to stop in where there was hail and it could risk dying to hail. So I had to wait and have it go into a different area so I could actually encounter it and not risk it dying to hail. Then, much like Galarian Articuno, Galarian Zapdos was relatively easy to catch, and all that was left was Galarian Moltres. Now, Galarian Moltres, I was on the Isle of Armor, and I saw it flying in the distance, and I tried to cut it off, and it worked out perfectly, and I figured the last 2 birds were pretty easy to catch. This one shouldn't be too hard. Oh, I was wrong. I ended up having this thing struggle once and nearly struggled the second time before it ended up finally getting caught. It took me like 30 minutes to catch this thing. We then put all these new Galarian forms into home in their respective spots, and next was Hisui. There are 4 Pokemon we have to get from Hisui. It's the Hisuian Voltorb, Hisuian Electrode, Hisuian Growlithe, and Hisuian Arcanine. And we're starting with Hisuian Growlithe. It was honestly kind of difficult to catch. They kept seeing me and getting angry, and I didn't want to like one-shot them because I didn't really have a good Pokemon to attack wild Pokemon with. But eventually we ended up catching 2, and we evolved one using a Firestone. Next up was Hisuian Voltorb, and this one was a lot easier to catch because they are a lot more docile and will easily go to most food that you throw at them, and then we just throw a Pokeball at their backs, and we caught them pretty easily. Then we just used a Leaf Stone on one of them and evolved it into a Hisuian Electrode. So that's Hisui done, and we can put these in their respective slots as well. The last few regional variants we have to get are the Paldean Tauros. So I loaded up my Scarlet version, found an easy cluster of Paldean Tauros, the combat breed, which we caught relatively really easily. And then we had to get the Blaze Breed and the Aqua Breed. In order to do that, I had to make a Fire level 1 sandwich for the Blaze Breed, and very quickly, we got a Blaze Breed to spawn. Next up was the Aqua Breed, and since I wasn't really played through my Violet version too far, I had to just buy a sandwich that gave me Encounter Power 1, and like the Blaze Breed, it didn't take me long to find an Aqua Breed Tauros. So those were the last of the regional variants, and that should be every Pokemon from Kanto, right? Well, there's one left. We still gotta get Mew. Now, in order to get Mew from its original game, you can actually do this quite easily in the Red and Blue Virtual Console. I think it works too with Pokemon Yellow, but it might be a bit more complex. In order to do this, all you gotta do is start your game and name yourself GF. This is to mimic Game Freak, which had an event distribution for Mew in Red and Blue Virtual Console. Then you do this weird glitch with these duplicated X specials, and you end up finding this special item called 8F. I'm not gonna explain too much into detail how to do this glitch, but there are tutorials. I even have like a series of tutorials on how to do this. It's kind of cringe. It was one of the first videos I ever made, but if you want to check it out, I guess I'll leave that on the card now. After we get 8F, we get this specific set of Pokemon in our party, while we get a specific set of items in our bag, and we use 8F. Then we go and slightly alter the items we have in our bag and use 8F again, and just like that, every Pokemon we catch at this point has the original trainer of GF with a specific ID, which is the same ID that Game Freak used for their distribution. Then we tease this same NPC with a battle and run away again, as we usually do. Then we simply go up Nugget Bridge and battle this one youngster who has a Slowpoke. After defeating his Slowpoke, we just go back to the left until our menu opens, and wow, we got ourselves an official event Mew, right? Sure. So being Mew, being a mythical Pokemon, super rare, I got myself a Weeping Bell. I had to put this thing to sleep. I figured this was going to take forever to catch, and oh, never mind. We caught it in one ball. Well, that was a bit anticlimactic for the Mirage Pokemon, but you know what? I'll take it. We got ourselves Mew, and before we go, we just had to give this NPC the battle he deserved all along. So I battled this NPC. I actually did this for a reason, because natures in Pokemon from the older games are determined based on how much experience they have. So I wanted to do one battle with Mew just to give it kind of a random set of experience, so their nature was a bit more randomized. Then we sent this Mew into Pokemon Bank, and I'm showing the footage of PokeTransporter just to show that it is legal, that you can send it into Pokemon Bank with no issues doing that method I did. Then we got it into home with no issues and put it into the correct spot. The last thing I wanted to do is, I did this at the beginning for a few of the Pokemon, but I wanted to finish off giving every possible Pokemon the Gigantamax factor that can get it in Sword and Shield. So we gave all our new Pokemon Max Soup, and we made every Gigantamax capable Pokemon in Kanto actually capable of Gigantamaxing, which is pretty cool. So here is my new updated living dex for Kanto. We got every Pokemon, every form, every gender difference, every regional variant, all caught in the original games they were introduced in, including the evolutions. And that is pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it helped you out in any way trying to find some of these Pokemon. If you want to do a living dex like this on your own, let me know in the comments below. But until then, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, ring those notification bells, all that good stuff. Be sure to join the domiNATION, and I will see you in the next video.